Aloha. Thank you for watching. My name is Representative George Fontaine, and you're watching Better Government. Tonight we're going to do a recap of the last legislative session here in 2012 and get some thoughts from some of our representatives and a senator from here at the state capitol to talk about what their impressions were like. What did they like or didn't like about the session? What was different? What wasn't different? First, let me introduce to my left Representative Barbara Marumoto, and to her left, Senator Sam Slom. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you,
George.
George.
Happy to be here.
So, give us your thoughts and your impressions from maybe 30,000 feet. What was your feeling, Senator, about how the session went?
I'll give you my impression from about 12 feet instead.
Okay.
You know, a lot of people thought that, well, it didn't do much harm. It was okay. There weren't that many controversial issues. But that's both true and not so true. First of all, because it's an election year, a lot of the same tax increase proposals and regulatory proposals that you know, reared their ugly heads last year were held in abeyance, but mark our words, they'll be back next year, and we know that. Well, that was good. We didn't have to concentrate on that. But there were hundreds of fee increases that were introduced, and a fee and a tax, you know, where's the difference? The people in Hawaii are so used to paying additional costs and higher costs for everything, and they just keep going up and up and up. The only thing that doesn't go up is our income. Our costs go up and our expenditures. So from that standpoint, we are able to kill a number of those increases or moderate some of them, but we still had increases that went up. I think there were several battles, and one of the battlegrounds was the Senate majority, and remember, I'm just one lonely Republican out of 25. The 24 senators in the Democrat majority, they had one bill that they were pushing, and their primary bill was their bill to repair, maintenance for schools, infrastructure, and all that. And it was a bill of $500 million, $500 million. And I remember they asked me particularly, they always like bipartisanship. They always want me to join with them. And I said, look, I'll join with reservations because there were good parts of the bill and there were parts that were not so good. And I said, but look, you think you're going to send this over to the House and it's going to sail right through and everybody's going to be as excited about it as you are. And as we learned later on, it was not. And the bill was scaled down. There was a lot of infighting and outfighting in the end. So that took up a lot of time from the Senate's position. And the other time consumer were the bad bills that came out of the Senate relating to exempting the state and county from the regulatory and environmental process. And luckily, most of those bills were killed. But again, the administration wants to exempt itself from the very burdensome regulations that all private industry must undergo. So these battles will be back. So I look, George, at every legislative session to see, number one, did it improve the economic viability of the people of Hawaii statewide? And I would have to answer, no, it didn't. And number two, I say, did the thrust of the legislature improve and increase personal liberty and freedom of choice? And again, I would have to say, no, it did not. We have more bans, we have more restrictions, we have more things that you cannot do, the government telling us things that you can do. So from that standpoint, it could have been worse, it can always be worse, but then it can be better as well.
Well, you know, I kind of equate it to this, at least from the House perspective, was that, you know, we kept hearing like, look, it's only a $25 increase. You know, yeah. Oh, it's only a $50 increase. Oh, we're only going to raise it $40. But then when you started thinking about it, it's like this is a death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly.
Because you take into the totality of what was raised. Sure. And it got to be to the point where I was starting to get tired standing up all the time and saying, you can't do this to the working folks. Mm-hmm. Even to this day, I'm hearing from constituents who are really upset about the registration fees that they're having to pay now. I was at a community...
As well they should be.
Yeah. I was at a community meeting the other night, and this gentleman says, you know, I may end up having to go out of business. I don't know how I'm going to start affording all of these additional fees that you guys just tacked on. Mm-hmm. And I said, we did our best to fight them back, but, you know, we needed to have people come down and testify and really share with us, and people don't, you know, unfortunately, to really share how these things are going to impact, you know, the regular family.
And you know, the worst part, and Representative Marumoto knows better than both of us over the years, you invite people to come down and testify, particularly business people. You say, what do we have to do? you know, to make it better so you'll hire more people, you'll be more profitable, you'll invest in the community. And they tell us, here, this is what you have to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we say, thank you very much for coming, and then we do exactly the opposite. And that's the frustrating part. And as people know, we make the legislative session convenient for us. The times are convenient for us. The parking is convenient for us. The agenda and the way that we do things are convenient for us. So when a business person or 2 or 3 come down, it's a big deal because they have to give up time from their business. We should listen to them more because they are proven. They know how to create jobs and how to deal with these problems, and yet we don't. And I guess part of that is because we have so many of our colleagues who have never met a private payroll in their lives. And they can talk about all kinds of things, but unless you've been in the trenches, battling with these taxes, battling with the permits, battling with the regulations, then you really don't know how much time it takes away from your business, your employment, and your product or service.
Barbara, what was your impressions?
Well, you know, fees are a big thing, and it really hurts small business, as you point out. And we didn't do taxes because, of course, it's an election year. We don't want to raise taxes. So we raise fees instead, and it might be sort of hidden. It might be on the businesses, on the banks, on the insurance companies, on professional employer organizations.
PEOs.
That's right. And the ones who do payrolls for small business. And so on elevator inspections. So you don't really, the person on the street is not paying out of the pocket, but you know, every time they go to pay for something, it's going to be a higher cost.
It's a cost of doing business, and to the extent that it can, a business will pass along those costs to the consumer. So ultimately, it's the same taxpayers that pay for all of it.
Yeah. So these PEOs that do the payroll for small business, some of them will be paying fees to do business of $10,000 every 2 years. How do they make money, you know, when they're paying this type of license fee? Yeah. It's ridiculous.
I think Barbara brings up probably the single most egregious bill of the session, and that was Senate Bill 2424, which came from the Senate, came from the Maui senator, as a matter of fact. And the idea was, we've got to protect businesses and the consumer in case one of these PEOs takes the money and runs and all that.
Well, I understand there was one incident.
There was one incident, that's right. The point is, you know, you can always find a problem, but finding the right solution without over-regulating or overburdening, that's the trick. And the problem with this PEO bill, which all of us have urged the governor to veto,
correct,
and you had 19 votes against it in the House, we had 3 against it in the Senate, but it's a bad bill because, first of all, it sets up requirements and regulations that no small business actually can afford. We already have a bonding and surety requirement, and this takes it 5 times, 10 times, 20 times higher. And a check with local insurers, commercial insurers in Hawaii, finds that, in fact, you can't get that kind of surety bond.
Minimum of $500,000.
Right, right. But you can't get the bond, which means in order to comply with the law, the small business would have to put that amount of cash
in escrow.
In escrow. First of all, where are they going to get that money? Secondly, how can you have the money just sitting there and not being able to use it? And thirdly, when you look at this bill, it's bad for the PEOs, it's bad for their employees, it's bad for the many hundreds of small business clients who they handle all this paperwork and bureaucracy for, and their employees as well. And finally, it's bad for the community. It's a job killer, as Representative Gene Ward would always like to say. He'd like to list the job killers. This is a job and business killer. And it also has an insidious part to it, and that is it serves as a barrier to entry and crony capitalism for a few, very few, select big businesses. And that's the real thing. So we're hoping the governor will do the right thing. I know he's gotten a lot of correspondence and veto that bill.
Folks, if you're just watching us, my name is Representative George Fontaine, and you're watching Better Government. Tonight we're talking about the overview of the last legislative session, and my guest this evening is Representative Barbara Marumoto and Senator Sam Slom, here to share their thoughts and feelings about what happened this past session. Getting back to the PEO bill, I think the other thing too was that they had put in a requirement for the very expensive audit was also included in that. And again, we go back to the fact that when we were sitting, I remember when the bill first came through, we didn't really know that much about it. You know, we just it was like, you know, it was like we were drinking the Kool-Aid here with this thing, because nobody came in. All we heard was from the big boys coming in to testify, saying that, you know, this bill is great and, you know, this is really going to help and all this. And it wasn't until I believe it was you, Barbara, that one of the smaller companies had contacted her and said, this is really bad. And then she came in and basically filled us in about what this was all going to be about. So thank you for opening our eyes to this issue. And then we looked at it and we realized, yeah, this was a really bad
This
deal.
brings up a couple of points. First of all, as the only one of my species in the state Senate, I don't have the luxury of drinking Kool-Aid. So I've got to read every bill, I've got to talk to people, I've got to find out, and I determined very early at the initial hearing it was a bad bill, and we made that information, you know, available. But the other point you bring up is a really good one. Small businesses cannot afford to have lawyers or lobbyists or special strategic people down at the legislature all the time. Some big businesses can, and they do. And so they do get the information first. They know exactly what's happening. They can kind of steer that information. And you're right, usually by the time a small business finds out about it,
it's too late.
It may be too late. That bill is sailing through. But fortunately, in talking to some of these small businesses, they didn't even realize how many competitors they had and how many small businesses were involved, independent private businesses. So the good thing that's probably going to come out of this is that these businesses will get together. You know, I'm a small business owner. I'm a small business advocate. And over the years, people have asked me a lot of questions about small business. And I've always said our strength in small business is our independence. Our weakness in small business is our independence. We don't join together. We don't get together in organizations.
We have business, you know, Chamber of Commerce and those kinds of things. But
a lot of those are social, you know.
And you're absolutely right. And the thing about it is that business people are too busy trying to run their business.
Right, and they're independent, and that's the important thing. They're independent.
Exactly.
They want to run their business, they want to do it their way and all that, which is the American way, and which is how we have been so successful up to the last couple of years. So, you know, I made a statement in my opening presentation this year at the session in January that we have reached a tipping point nationally and locally. And what we do in the next several months of this year and into the early next year is going to determine both the economic and the political future of our nation and our state. I'm bullish, though, on Hawaii. I mean, you know, we can talk about the problems, and there are many. We can talk about things that should be done differently. But I'm bullish that we've got the opportunities, we've got the people, we've got the resources, we've got a lot of things going for us. We just have to unleash that voluntary free market incentive competitiveness.
You know, one of the other troubling things, aside from what happened in the session, but what we were seeing that was happening on an administrative level was the internally generated administrative fees. I'll give you an example. I have a constituent who's a dive instructor in Lahaina. And he used to pay for his parking permit to park at the Lahaina Harbor. He used to pay $30 a quarter. He just got his bill a couple of weeks ago for his quarterly payment. It went from $30 to $270 a quarter.
Ouch.
That's a 900% increase.
Yeah.
And he called me up and he goes, "This is outrageous." I said, "Now a person who wants to go surfing at the Lahaina Harbor has to pay $10 just to park there for the day, and I have to pay $270 per quarter. How do I now factor this into the expense of my dive business and all these other things that have been increased, even internally?" It seems to be this mechanism is that, well, we're just going to go ahead and do it, and he's frustrated. It's like, what do I do? How do I appeal?
And as you said earlier, it's not just that fee. It's that fee and this fee and the other fee. You add all those things together, and people don't realize, and they usually get mad at the business. Why did that business raise the cost of the dive, or why did the cost of the hamburger go up and all that? Right. They never look at the government, which is the source and the cause of those problems. And you want better government, that's one of the things you got to do.
Well, there was some good things that came out of this session, just my impression. I liked some of the agricultural bills that we had. We had some good ones about trespassing on ranch lands. We had another one which dealt with agricultural theft. And I don't know how much of a problem that is here on Oahu, but on Maui it's a real big problem. We get these folks that go out in the middle of the night and they steal the papayas and the avocados, and then they go down to the farmer's market and they sell
They show up there.
And I had it even happen on my property. I had a bunch of people show up, and they were just brazen. They came in the middle of the day and they started raiding my mango tree.
Yeah.
And you know, they're going down the street and then they're going to sell it for $1 or $2 a pound or whatever it is that they sell it for. And so these laws requiring identification, you know, you have to show where you bought this from.
Yep.
You know, which farm you got it from, was put into place to really try to help the
And see, I'm a
agriculture-
critic of government. Everybody knows that. But there are legitimate things that government should do, and this happens to be one of them.
Yeah.
And in answer to your question, yeah, we do have those problems on Oahu as well. Not to the extent of the neighbor islands and not to the monetary extent. And look how long it's taken us to get even this far. These bills are not perfect.
No.
There's still loopholes and there's still, you know, questions and all that. But year after year, we've been trying to deal with this. Mr. Balsam for the Big Island, who is probably the #1 citrus expert in the world. I mean, people from all major corporations in all countries always came, and he described the same thing. Middle of the day, they're driving the trucks up and they're taking, you know, his product and all that. That's a responsibility of government, protection and security. And the fact that we've had to argue for so many years and not get, you know, even a basic thing like this done is really an indictment on government. We shouldn't put up with it, and we're paying for it all.
I'm upset with the people who are cutting down these papaya
The papaya trees, yeah.
I don't know. I hope they catch them very soon.
Yep.
But one of my bills was copied in agriculture, and that had to do with bringing back the dog detection program
Yes,
to catch
excellent
invasive
bill.
species. So my bill was heard, and then after the hearing, it was scooped into the chairman's bill, Chairman Tsuji, and so it eventually did pass. And but I don't get the credit for it. I think the chairman gets the credit for it because it was.
Well, you actually had a number of really great ideas and bills that you introduced this session, and unfortunately they were hijacked by other members. And you know, that's the whole thing that's a frustrating part. And again, sharing about, you know, my impressions of the session. And I'm a freshman. This is only my second year doing this. But this whole concept of gut and replace, you know, we looked at Senate Bill 755, which started out as a really fuzzy, warm, let's help families with school supplies.
That's right.
Then it morphed into gambling. And then it moved on to being an environmental bill that we're going to exempt all public
But George, let's be fair. This is one of the few procedures that is absolutely honest in its description. Gut and replace.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. I've been here 16 years. You've been here longer than me. I had never seen a session where gut and replace started so early and so frequently and was used in both the House and the Senate as it was this year. Usually we use placeholder bills. We've got short form bills that later on can be expanded into a subject, but here it was a definite gut and replace.
I was thinking that, you know, next session we should just introduce a bill that says relating to the state of Hawaii and leave it blank.
That would be general enough. That's right.
And then you could just put anything you want in there.
The good news, okay, you're looking for good news and all that. The Senate website, I mean the legislative website, House and Senate, was redone several months ago and is a lot better now and a lot user-friendlier than it was before. And so even with all these tricks like gut and replace, where you keep the same number and the same general title but totally different contents, people are following that now and they're able to do that electronically.
Yes.
And they're able to testify easier through email. So those are good things, and those are things that, you know, we can applaud. But everybody talks about transparency, and you know, in many ways we have less transparency than we did years ago.
Barbara, what was your feelings about how conference went this year? It seemed real different than the first year when I served.
Well, conference to me is a period where it gets transparency just sort of
leaves the
disappears.
building.
Everything's meetings in back rooms, and so it's very difficult for us to know exactly what's happening. And sometimes as minority members, we're the first to know because we're at the table. But it's very hard to access decision making on conference committees. The best thing to do is go talk to your chairman. If we're House members, we talk to our House members. Hopefully that he or she would agree with us and hold our opinions throughout the negotiations. So that's the best we could do. But my entire focus is for greater transparency, greater openness, and we don't have that during conference committee at all.
Right. And it just felt differently. You know,
Well, you're right. It was different.
It was like we went all the way to the deadline, and then all of a sudden we extended it. Just so we could get some things through.
See, I've got to tell you, in 2011, I was proud of the Democrat majority in the Senate, because when we got down to the end, they said, okay, 6 p.m. today, that's it.
Right.
Whatever we have negotiated, fine. If we don't, we leave it. Nobody believed that because it had never really happened before. We always pull the plug, we extend and all that. 6 p.m., I was sitting at the table. We got up and walked out. And as a consequence, there were a lot of bills that did not get passed last year. And I thought that was a good thing.
It was.
They made the statement this year, but then they waffled, and then we extended, we extended, we extended, we extended. You can't do that because nobody will have respect for you.
Yeah, they went way past midnight, and we didn't know what was happening until we see the bill that's printed maybe Saturday.
Well, yeah, we didn't know. We didn't know whether we were going to vote on Saturday.
And the reason the public is so frustrated about the conference committee, first of all, you see the kabuki show in front of you, but as Barbara says, it's all behind closed doors. It's between the chairs, the chair of the House and Senate committees. Even majority members on that committee very seldom know what's going on because they're not a party of it. And the public is frustrated because there's no testimony, there's no input, and they see, okay, we'll defer this till the next time, and defer, and it's not unusual for the conference committee to come back 5, 6, 7, 8 times on that bill.
We have about 30 seconds left, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to congratulate Representative Marumoto on her retirement.
Yay.
She's been at the House now for how many years have you served?
34 years, 17
It's a long
terms.
time.
But she still looks young.
And we want to thank you for your public service and everything that you do. I know that being a freshman, I've learned a lot from you, and I've appreciated your support. And Sam as well, too. I appreciate your support.
But thank you, George. We all appreciate everything we've all learned from Barbara. Last message is people can still get involved. It's important that they get involved in this campaign. They can make a difference. They need to make a difference for Hawaii's future.
And on that note, I'd like to thank all of you for listening to Better Government, and we'll see you next time.